All right, let's go. Episode two. We are doing this today at a different time. I guess because because we're both too busy. That's the only time we could find to do this was at a good lunchtime, just to have a good chat and a laugh. I think you're gonna enjoy this episode. I'm Carlos Conceição, and this is RTC Roto Lab. Welcome, everyone. As I mentioned, episode two. During episode one, we had the point of view of Roto Prep supervisor. What do we deal on the day by day? What happens with outsource and all of these hot topics about what we can do with different versions of Roto, how to improve this, how to contribute to growing growing this art. Today we have pretty much the what we call the client side. In this case, our clients are comp, right? That's the sole reason why we're doing Roto, is to feed beautiful mats into the compositing department to help finishing the shots. And to help me with this, who better than my good friend, Ben McEwan. Hello, hello.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going?
Good, man.
Busy,
Thanks
no?
for inviting me on your show to have a little chat.
Busy. We were trying to find a good time to do this, and it's like, well, why not? Why not lunchtime, right?
Exactly. Especially one of the Friday traditions for me before COVID was going to the pub, sometimes for a beer, sometimes just for a good meal and a chat. But now I guess we just have the chat online.
Awesome. Do you want to tell us who you are and what you do? I believe that you're well known from the compositing community, but we might have people here in this audience that have no idea. So tell me a bit about you.
Yeah, of course. From the accent, you can probably tell I am Australian. So I started my career in Australia and pretty quickly moved over to Vancouver and have been working in Canada for quite some time. And outside of that, like I just love to teach. I like teaching people new things and especially about comp because it's something I'm super passionate about. So across the years, I've taught at a few local film schools in Vancouver. I've taught privately over the internet, and I have like a couple of courses that I sell to kind of upskill people in some areas that they might be interested in. Um, yeah, I mean, the list goes on. I'm kind of following whatever interests me at the time.
Man, I knew you before coming to Magengin. It's like it's a reference, like all your newsletter is the reference in comp when you want to search for anything that is new. You haven't done it for a while, right?
You're too kind, but yeah, I haven't done it for a while. Honestly, it turned into like almost a full-time job, just trying to
Yeah,
gather some really high quality stuff.
it's
And we
crazy.
know it, we all know it's out there. And the feedback I got from people, even some at Image Engine, were like, "This is like great. Like,
So
I have
nice.
no time to go and find this stuff for myself."
Yeah,
So I was glad I could help for a time, but life changes and sometimes time drives up. So yeah, it's been a
I
little
know.
while, but I'm still there looking at that stuff, even though I'm not sharing it as much these days.
Yeah, we're busy. And in terms of company work, it's like you were heading the comp department, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I support the entire comp team. Every show we have at Image Engine, every artist we have at Image Engine. And yeah, my goal is really just to try and have our comp team working as efficiently as they can be, creating the best work they can do.
Awesome. We had amazing discussions internally, and I really think that some of those discussions are so interesting that it would be fun to bring that here publicly to also help the community go and have a bit more information. That's the whole point of doing this, is expose a little bit, talk about the differences. Um, and our hot topic, this is why I created this segment of today, is Roto. Something that it's might be quite dear to you. It is quite dear to me. Not so dear to a lot of people. I don't know why. We have this thing that everyone hates Roto. And in the end of the day, I've crossed paths with a lot of people that actually enjoy to do it and don't mind to do that, and understand how can that also contribute for their future. I think we can start by just giving an idea to people what is Roto, and how can that be used in comp. I think everyone knows a little bit about the layering. That is kind of the soul of compositing. That's how compositing started, even back in the day with the optical mats that they had to do. But they don't know all the other options that people can do in comp with a good Roto. Do you want to give us a bit of an insight on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's so many, but I'm aware we only have an hour and a bit. Honestly, like layering is always the number one thing. It's the most obvious thing because it's what we use Roto for the most, right? But two other areas that I would say we use Roto for quite often is selective grading of plates, and mostly just being able to give us some precision on edge treatments. And to expand a little bit on that, um, selective grading of plates happens for a various amount of reasons. I would say for me personally, what I've used it for the most would be for like faking shadows. Let's say you have a sweaty actor on set with lights shining on them, and then you have a big CG monster towering over them. You can't just like get the roto, put the character in front of the CG, and call it a day. We're often using that roto to then grade selectively those sweaty highlights, and rather than getting all the highlights on the zippers that are reflecting lights and stuff, you could just use the roto for somebody's
Yeah.
face or hair, and combine it with the key for highlights just to like grade it down, and have the big CG monster occlude some of those light sources.
And especially nowadays, like what the plates that we receive, they look a bit more rushed, especially because
Yeah.
on set it's very expensive to be moving blue screens, green screens around. And what we do also is help to key. Is like
Yeah.
going to those areas that you like. There's a blue screen in there, but there's a million shades of blue, and some of them are black, some of them are white, and it's quite impossible to just start pulling, or it just takes too long. So we decide to roto a bit more, to kind of support the comper in that stage, or else it would take you just a week to get all of those little different keys around, right?
Yeah, and I find it's interesting to watch over the last 10 years how the industry has transitioned. I've always had some terrible green screens or blue screens in plates before, but the thought process, I would say 10 years ago, is definitely let's get as far as we can. We'll get little bits and pieces of roto to kind of help out. But then your patchwork quilt of a blue screen turns into a patchwork quilt of comp, and things never quite look right. So one of the things that we get from rotoing over a blue screen, even though from a conceptual point of view, it just sounds like a waste of time, it's actually going to get you a much, much better, more optically correct result than if you were to key a dark result here, a bright result here, blend between and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And the best example of this is where you see like a blue screen that only covers like up to here on somebody, and then you have bright sky above that.
Oh my
So trying
goodness.
to basically do two comp treatments and have that blend together is really tricky. But having that roto that kind of covers that cross section and gives you a really clean, consistent edge is a huge help for being able to kind of smooth out those details and the semi-transparent edges.
We have our good friend Pedro saying hi from Complair.
Good to see you, Pedro.
Nice. So yeah, really, really like helping, pretty much like providing comp with tools to be able to integrate things better. We know, like, even when we have like on set shooting and the camera is pointing up and you see lights behind the characters, it's like all of this stuff is going to be so incredibly difficult to comp, that any help that you can have is going to be really important. Now, what does constitute a good roto? because that is probably the oldest question that I've seen in my department. And we had this conversation before. Every year, I need to have this conversation with a lot of people. Fortunately, not so much at Image Engine, because everyone is quite on an agreement of what does this represent. But across the years, the whole career, we've been dealing with this question: what is a good roto? How should we do it? And the reasons why. So, what is for you good roto? Is it just something any mat, or there are specific things that you are looking for when you are trying to comp?
Yeah, there's of course specifics, and depending on who you're asking, you're going to get a very different answer. But my philosophy is you always have to think about what's optically correct. And in terms of roto, what I mean by that is you can often see a hard edge, and I know a lot of people just roto to that hard edge. You can often see like some motion blur or some defocus and like the edge of that part as well. And some people roto to that. Some people choose to put their spline in the middle of those two and kind of let silhouette or nuke or their tool of choice like interpolate between it. Um, I honestly don't think the technique is as important as the goal that you're striving towards when you're doing that roto. And I think what is optically correct in sense of like the roto term is exactly like if you were to shoot a black and white matte, what's it going to look like?
Yeah,
Shot through the same lens with the same camera.
exactly.
And you're going to look at the characteristics that I mentioned of like motion blur or defocus. How we simulate those, there are a bunch of different tools. And yeah, again, it's really about the final end result. And why I say that is I know there are a lot of compositors out there who will always ask for splines that they can tweak, which I think defeats the purpose of like if a compositor is asking for a spline, then I don't think the roto is quite done yet. If they are only okay with a hard edge, then they have to manually do the work to essentially rush through the mimicking the motion blur or mimicking any transparencies essentially. And you really need somebody dedicated to spending the time to create an accurate matte with all the right features, like it would be shot through a lens to be right. And that the interesting thing about that is, or why I feel a lot of compositors might ask for only a hard edge matte, is because they don't want to deal with edge work. It's one of the
Exactly.
things that most
Exactly.
compositors hate, right?
But
But
isn't that the core essence for me of compositing? It's
yep,
integration.
it totally is.
It's our job as compositors to integrate, and
Yeah,
integrate is pretty much about edges. Edges is the first thing. Everything else
yeah,
comes after that as a plus. But integrating is like it's like integrating a CG. It's like if is it there or not? Is those edges connecting or not? Or I do believe that thing is not there and I was not born in there. So
yeah. I
it
mean,
starts exactly there, right? Integrating, and how can you integrate that thing to be believable?
yeah, if we were still using optical printers, I think there would be a lot more room for error. But now we have so much precision in manipulating any images we have, whether that's a plate or whether that's a matte or anything like that. So essentially, like what you want is let's stick with talking about motion blur
Yeah,
rather than a hard edge and adjusting the edge to just the point where you don't get any edge contamination is not going to be optically correct because the
exactly.
motion blur is not going to match the shutter of the camera. Um, but what you want to do is you want to have that accurate amount of motion blur, and you might get some bright sky shining through. You might get some mud from the background shining through. And then it's the compositor's job to go in and be like, okay, there shouldn't be bright sky in this edge because there's like a matte painting back there, a mountain, or there's a character. We got to remove that. We got to paint that out. And that is compositing, is integrating elements together to make sure that they all feel like they're part of the same world. And
Yeah.
there are valid reasons for why compositors would only want to use a hard edge matte from Roto. But the beauty of having a quote unquote photorealistic or optically correct matte is you can use the gamma, you can crunch down all of those
Exactly.
values and you can create your own hard edge matte. So
You have that
you
for
basically
free,
do the
right?
roto once and yeah, you have what you need for free.
It's usually the debate comes with like, oh, I want a hard edge matte, and I'm the first one to understand because I've done years of comp, and I know that you need that hard edge to be able to extrude those edges and get rid of everything that is seen through the motion blur, right? So that is sure, you need this. Now the question always comes with, do you want the splines on the hard edge or not? Because we know that to creating a good motion blur matte that is interpolated by Silhouette or by Nuke, the splines have to be in the middle. Or there is variations of this, little slight variations out of this that I will develop in a specific live stream that I'll do about technique. But we know that the splines are going to have to be in the middle, which means if you just have the splines in the middle, out of the box, the splines will not give you anything, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be in the middle of the motion blur. You don't have the hard edge or even the soft. You have just right in the middle. It gives you nothing. So in this case, you have to turn on the motion blur and let it interpolate properly. The other option is, okay, let's go and put the splines on the hard edge just to give that hard edge matte. But then the consequences of that are dramatic because you're going to have to extend and compact every single frame, and in different directions for every object or body part that moves in a different direction. So this just causes that you have to do roto frame by frame, which is what we try in terms of efficiency to run away from, is doing frame by frame, right? So in the end of the day, what we can produce by doing motion blur is giving comp the option of having both versions. We provide you the good motion blur version. You gamma it down to have the hard edge version. You extract your edges, you integrate it nicely, and then you pre-mult it again using the motion blur version, and you get back that softness, that perfect softness around the edges that will avoid you having to maybe kick it back into paint just to fine-tune those edges, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it seems simple, right? It seems quite simple, but this is like, you can't imagine. I know at least 6 different ways that I've seen across my career of doing this, and some of them involve not having any motion blur at all, any motion blur, which scares me. Because in terms of actual execution from my side, and also when I was a comper, I was like trying to figure out, what can I do now with this? Sure, I can extrude my edges, but what about motion blur? I need to integrate these. These need to look good, and it's quite complicated, complicated to do it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's always lazy if you fake the edge just to save work, because it's always going to look a little bit off, even if it's consistent, if it's not matching the correct characteristics of what was shot on set based off the lens used or the shutter speed of the camera and all sorts of things. It's always going to look a bit funky. This is something we were talking about the other day, is like when you have a retimed shot.
Oh, that's another one.
So yeah, like if you were to roto with the motion blur that is consistent in a retimed shot, you're technically not matching the optical characteristics of the camera.
Absolutely.
So you have to vary your shutter speed in Silhouette to kind of change the amount of motion blur. And sure, it might look weird, but it's not because it's incorrect to the plate. It's weird because retimes are just inherently weird.
Exactly. They were not shot that way, right?
Exactly.
It's just so simple. Imagine that we're retiming a picture, but the actual photography doesn't get retimed, right? We're just cutting frames out or interpolating some of them, trying to figure out what is happening in the middle, but nothing really changes to the actual photography. You just cut, let's say, a normal shutter 180, you'll get this nice cinematic motion blur. But then you start chopping frames just to, like, I don't know, make something a bit more action-driven or to even slow it down as well. But again, like, how can you contribute with a motion blur for this? Like, your splines, whenever you are moving your splines, they will move faster. So if they move faster, you turn on the motion blur is going to be wrong because the motion blur is going to be bigger. They're moving faster, the motion blur goes bigger. And a lot of people have difficulty in understanding this. And also that has consequences for CG, right? Because CG has to match the photography, or else you'll have the live action that has something, and then the CG that just uses a normal 180 throughout when the actual photography is getting faster, right? The plate is getting faster.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question, and I think it's not
Yeah.
too much explored. I think people try to simplify. People try to figure out like, oh, just Roto is simple, just put some splines in there, give out some mats, and then let comp handle it. I do believe it's not just like that.
Definitely not, and I think we've already explained why. But one really interesting thing I'm curious to talk more with you about,
Yeah.
Carlos, is AI. And like, I know it's a
Oh.
huge topic in the industry right now, and the only reason I bring it up is I interview a lot of people to join our comp team, and one of the questions that people are asking in terms of like, what's the future of image engine, or what's the future of visual effects, is like, are you focusing on AI? Are you doing anything there? And in my personal opinion, I don't think we're quite there yet. We've only been talking for 20 minutes so far, and we've already talked about the complexities of how roto needs to be done, and it's tricky to do by hand and get right and get optically correct. From the tests I've seen publicly available, I'm not sure that we're quite there yet,
Hmm.
and I'm excited about how things are developing, but I think we're a little prematurely excited about it. What do you think?
um, I think it's too soon, and 5 years ago when I first saw this, um, my first reaction is, oh, like we just started, like the first thing that I've seen was like Rotobot, and I've tested it, and I was like, oh, it's too soon. Like give it 5 years. And 5 years later, we are here, and I haven't seen any public release of anything that is available that can get remotely close to what we believe it's a mat that is QC'd and goes into comp and can contribute to a final QC. The only thing we see that can help is just for some garbage mats to present clients with the work in an early version. And that is a different story, because that certainly contributes a lot. But what people say, and that is what for me worries me, and people say like, you're just getting old, Carlos. Don't worry about your jobs. People just say Roto is gonna be dead, you know. And I do believe, because knowing how to do it and the way we have to QC, the complexity that is behind actually doing Roto, I do believe we started in the wrong way. It shouldn't be Roto that is going to be that, because Roto is probably one of the things that cannot be reused. Like Roto, every single shot you have to do it by hand. Even in comp, you can template a shot, and if you have 10 shots that are very similar, you can almost template that and just plug in different CGs, different rotos, different mats, different elements, and you can get closer to something. So in a sense, that is going to be easier to just generate. And Nuke is based on text. You can copy paste a node, and that's text that can be generated by a chat GPT. But Roto cannot be generated. Roto is not text. It has to be identified by human eye, and not just the object itself. It's just like those edges, understanding the photography, the motion blur, and then you have to separate the objects, and separating them is quite complicated because there's too many things involved in there, right?
Do you think we'll get there? You talked about the like 5-year chunks. Do you think in the next 5 years it's going to improve, seeing how rapidly the technology is evolving now?
I think in 5 years we will be able to identify more elements, more objects. But I do believe people are seeing this in the wrong way. For me, the way to approach this with AI, especially for Roto, would be inside the actual tools that do the Roto. Include AI in there. Imagine this, in Silhouette, I go there, and in my 5 key poses of that shot, I will do my own breakdown of the splines and say, this is the breakdown that I want. Now use software, use AI to figure it out and animate the splines for me. But let me change that. Let me edit. The problem right now with AI is not editable. What can we do with that? Paint the mats. It's not possible, right? So we need to find a way of using the technology to help us get to something that we can actually use in production, or else it's just a hobby.
Yeah,
It's
I
just a
mean,
hobby. I find it funny I just don't. I just can't use it, and that for me is frustrating because I would prefer to spend time right now in working on something that can actually get me to the final result, and I can use it massively to maybe instead of taking a shot that takes 15 days to do roto of like 3 or 4 full bodies, I could actually do that in 5 days, you know, and drive drive those splines and trying to figure out where the edges and keeping the consistency of them, keeping them together, like obeying all the rules that we do when we are animating splines, trying to input that into the software. But I don't see anyone, I don't see any of the companies that are involved in this paying too much attention to this. It just, I do believe people think that Roto is cheap, Roto is easy. Let's do Roto first, and then we'll take care of the rest. And I think they got it wrong this time.
Yeah, I
But
could not agree more. And like I totally agree philosophically that I think the way to approach the AI conversation is more about how do we use AI to assist the humans rather than use AI to give us the final result. Because naturally, when you pair the two things together, play the human and the AI to their strengths, you're going to get a better result versus, hey, computer, like I've only given you 3 shots to train, but you can give me the final result, right? And
yeah,
it's never going to work out like that.
it's not going to be simple. It's definitely not going to be as simple as people believe it's going to be. So I do believe in 5 years, we're not going to be having final roto, you know, unless it's like that very dead easy shot that I see a lot of people using green screens to do this and saying, oh, the actual AI is not looking at the green screen. It's actually looking at the edges. And it's like, yeah, but it's easy to identify the edges when you have a green screen. So
Yeah.
let's try to confuse this a bit more and make it a bit more difficult to have a use case that's going to use in production, because we have difficult plates. There's no such thing as an easy plate. And I do believe that in 5 years we're going to be able to use a bit more. I'm just worried that we're not contributing to really help the artists doing Roto. I think we're just finding cheap ways, easy ways of getting garbage mats. And I wish because no one has ever asked me how can I use AI to help you. It's just people just come up with solutions, and the first thing is saying, oh, this is dead, we got this. And I'm like, sure, if you believe that, sure. But meanwhile, I have 800 shots to deliver, and we have to do it by hand. So I'm still not contributing. And look, I'm using ChatGPT for code, for searching. I'm using that. I'm actually enjoying the technology. I don't know what is your opinion on the image generation. I think we are crossing a very thin line in there because of the copyrights, right? It's the same thing like when hip hop started to get those beats, you know, like little snippets from other records, from old records, and had to start copywriting, right? You can't just start using people's work and say, oh, I've done this. You have to copyright. You have to be careful with what you are using. And all of these things are being generated by, all these models are being generated by using stuff that you shouldn't, right?
Yeah, totally. And I had a really interesting argument about that the other day, and I'm still not sure if I agree with it or not. But somebody made the argument of if you're a film student, you're going to look towards the directors or the films that you like, and you're going to emulate them because you like the
Yeah.
style or the way they tell the story. Similarly, like if you go to art school and you want to learn to be a fine artist, you're going to be looking towards the painters and the paintings that you like, and you're going to start by emulating that. So yeah, is there a fine line between yeah, I
Stealing.
don't know. It's a tricky thing, right? Like that's why I'm hesitating because there's so many layers of nuance. Like
It is. It is.
is the AI model generating new art by that's influenced by other people's stuff, or is it directly being like, hey, artist A, I'm gonna cut out this ogre and I'm gonna place it in this thing? It's so complicated, and I don't think anybody knows the right answer because obviously it's unprecedented, isn't it?
Yeah. it's I think in the end of the day we're going to have to start deciding if you want to opt in or opt out, like people are
Yeah.
saying right now. It's like you are publishing something, you are publishing something that has some kind of copyright. You can't just simply use that and say, oh, because I'm changing a little bit, um, it's going to be for free. It was like, well, music started like that, and now
Mhm.
look at this massive lawsuits of people saying, "Oh, this is almost the same song as the other one. The rhythm is the same, the beat is the same." So you can't just simply use it, you know. I do believe it's a fun thing to do, and is generating incredible stuff. It's really incredible, and I think the technology is going to evolve, and we're going to be using it massively. We just have to find the ways of where we're going to be using that to our advantage without crossing the line. I think with respect. I think that's what we
Yeah.
have to do. You know, like you will not stop doing music because you are using someone else's beat. You know, like a clip. You're just gonna credit that artist, and you're gonna do something that is new, and you're gonna be making a hit that is gonna sell millions. Incredible. Let's do that. That's fine. It's
Yeah.
totally doable. Yeah.
It'd
For
be interesting
Roto,
to
I think
see
we're
where it
still far
goes,
away.
but I agree. I agree.
But it's going to be fine. I do believe for Nuke and to generate anything like even for like Houdini and like everything there's like node based and can be generated with text. I think it's going to be very easy. A lot of people are going to start be doing scripts, you know, out of that. Like, give me a script that does this, and that. It's like, sure, node, plug it in, boom, make it make sense, and that's it. It's gonna be doing something. Um, my wife is a software developer, and she tells me that a lot of people are just using ChatGPT, juniors. They haven't studied programming, and they're just using that to say, oh, I can do. I'm a developer now. And it's like, well.
Even a friend with a young child has been using it to write their essays rather than doing them themselves for their homework.
That's it, right?
It's pretty funny.
You just have to be smart. I think with like everything else. Like before, we had encyclopedias, right? And we were like scanning that and copying the text by hand. Then Google came up, and we're just selecting all and boom, pasting in that. Now ChatGPT gives you versions of this. And I think
Yeah.
in the end of the day, people will adapt to that, and that is going to be a tool that you're going to use and incorporate in your day by day. And as long as it gets you closer to do something faster and something better, you know, if it's not for doing something better and something faster, I'm going to be the first one to drop it. I think
Yeah.
that is
Well said.
pretty much the case here. I'll use it if it's good. If it's not, we'll just carry on trying, and I'll be fine. I'll be fine with that. We do a bit less Roto, we do a bit more paint. Carlos Hidrai says, "Bow down to your new robot overlords."
What you guys don't know is Carlos is a robot. It's the only explanation for how he does what he does.
My goodness. One of the things that I wanted to approach with you as well, it's another hot topic, and I've discussed this with many friends, which is the topic of career. You know, we know because we started a few years ago. We've seen a lot, and we know that Roto and Paint was traditionally seen as a stepping stone to go into comp. You know, and suddenly Roto and Paint goes more towards India because labor work is cheaper and we can do a lot of that. And suddenly, what I see on the new trend, all the schools they just almost abandon Roto and Paint, and they're saying, you know what, I can actually train you to be a compositor. You don't need to learn how to do Roto and Paint. What do you see are the consequences of this? Because what I've seen until now is devastating. But before I tell you what I think, tell me what you think about this. What are the consequences of people abandoning Roto and Paint
Yeah, it's
for
a real
training?
hot topic, and there's a few threads to pull. But the important thing to recognize is for profit visual effects schools are there to basically make money, and they're going to make money by making promises of like, oh, we can train you to be the best compositor. You don't need to do roto and paint because once you graduate our course, you'll go into comp. And I have seen that work out in some instances, but again, like I've interviewed countless amounts of people. I've worked with all sorts of compositors, from people just starting out, people who have been in the industry for 20 years. And there is a night and day difference between people who have either roto and paint training or roto and paint experience versus those who have just jumped into comp. And there's a couple of reasons why I think that is. I think it's because it really trains you to slow down and analyze an image in a way that like you have to get a good mat, right? Um, and I mean that's really the fundamental part of it in my eyes. Like um, I
It's the
think,
mindset,
sorry,
right?
my brain is going in so many different ways because
Yeah.
it is such a big topic. But the other thing to mention too is I think it's just the attention span of this day and age. And I even recognize it in myself that I'm not as focused as I was 5 years ago. And if you're kind of just getting started in your career wanting to be a compositor, and you have schools or people or whoever telling you like, oh, you don't have to do this, there's work out there, you can become a compositor, maybe you can, but that old adage of if you go slow to go fast, it is true in every sense of the word. And I think learning the fundamentals of how to look at an image is the most important thing for a compositor. And the thing that really helped me is spending years doing roto and paint before I ever comped an image. And it's still skills that I use today.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know that I think there's two things here. How can Roto help you? For me, it's the precision, it's the mindset. When you're a comper and you have to treat those edges, sometimes you have to paint, you have to fix frame by frame. Use your imagination to solve that puzzle, and that's what Roto brings you. It will bring you that obsessive precision on how to do things, and that you can only do by spending. I don't need you. Back in the day, you need to spend 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 6 years doing Roto. I don't think that is beneficial at all, But spending a good year doing Roto, and or both, oscillating between Roto and paint, that is just brings you so much. And then the paint side, like silhouette paint is going to help you with edges and all these solving problems and stealing information from other frames. That is Comp 101. And then Nuke side of things, the prep side of things, that is where I teach everyone the 101. That's where the best practices come along, how to build those scripts efficiently, how to simplify things. What I do believe a lot of people nowadays do is complicate, massive scripts, complicated scripts to do basic stuff. And you're like, well, you don't even understand the basics. Like some of the schools where I went to mentor, people were showing me, oh, I can do particles. Look, I've done a particle system. You don't know, you don't even understand how to degrain. Like you've degrained the whole plate and you are regraining the whole plate by the very end. I was like, I'm not interested in a particle system. I don't care about that. I do care. Is like my first question to you when I'm reviewing your script. Is like, why did you denoise the whole plate? And first of all, you didn't regrain the plate by the very end. And if you would regrain, what you do? Oh, I would regrain the whole thing by the very end. It's like, well, you just destroyed the whole plate. You cannot do that. The client will never accept. You'll have to just apply grain on the stuff that you are changing. You're going to have to match the grain. It's like, oh, I haven't learned that. Simple. You are running before knowing how to walk. You don't understand the different merges, the different operations, the basics, the fundamentals. And you're going straight away into like complex skiing and this and that. I was like, what complex skiing? You don't know how to generate a mat. And you are trying to do complex skiing. Complex skiing is just operations between mats, It's all about that. And in the end of the day, yeah, tell me.
I was going to say, like, an interesting analogy that I've heard explained to me, which I really resonate with, is it's like if you learn to draw, you're never setting out to draw an apple. You're always like encouraged to look at the shapes that are there, in terms of like the outline of the apple maybe, or like the shape of the shadow. You're not saying like, okay, I'm going to paint a shadow. It's I'm going to paint a oval on the ground kind of thing. And the same thing can be said about when you do roto. You're looking at a shot in the same way. You're not being like, I'm going to roto this person's jacket. It's like there's three shapes moving independently and I'm going to roto
Yeah.
that. And that analytical training of your mind helps you obviously to do roto, but obviously as you progress into comp where you have to solve a lot of pretty complex problems, if you don't have that prior training of just how your mind works, you're going to struggle more than somebody who has kind of gone through that and knows how to like dissect a shot and different parts, not literally for what they are, but for just different segments of the image.
Understanding parallax, right? It's so
Yeah.
important. That's what we do in Roto every single day. It's understanding parallax, understanding how things can be tracked in a different way with revealing objects. You know, if an object is rotating, we're trying to figure out how to break down is in smaller splines to get something that is natural, that feels natural. They don't feel like just something wobbling in there and adapting like so organic. I don't know. I feel like we are losing a lot. But I also feel, and I noticed this in my team, there are a lot of people that really enjoy to do this and they want to do a career out of Roto and Paint. And that for me is fascinating because I see the passion in there, you know, and you know like how subjective comp is, you know, different eyes, your lead is gonna look at your shot and it's like, oh, I like it. He goes to the comp soup and it's like, I don't really like it. Goes to the VFX soup, oh, I really like it. Goes to the client and saying, guys, there's nothing to do with this. I want something different. So that can be overwhelming for some people. And I do understand there is space for also the people that like objectivity and Roto and Paint is Boolean. Is it good or is it not? Did you remove the wire or did you not? Did you roto this perfectly? Is it matching photographically what is happening in there or not? And that is what I see right now. A lot of people just decide to like, oh, I want to do this. And the difference comes to the first question that Carlos Idrais was saying here, and I saved it for now because it says if Roto paid was if Roto paid as well as comp, rest assured people will learn how to love it. You know, and
Yeah, well
this
said.
is it comes to that, right? Because it traditionally started with not being like a specialist department. And ended up being a stepping stone for you to learn how to do comp because Roto, in the end of the day, is comp. And it's just like a natural progression of what you do inside the same department. And the more responsibility you get, the better you get paid. Nowadays, it's starting to be a specialist department. So I do respect someone that has been doing Roto for 30 years and wants to do this, and he's the best at doing Roto.
Yeah, I mean, again, I couldn't have said it better myself. I've noticed the same thing of, well, like when I started my career and I was doing roto and then some more paint, it was very much excuse the Australian English, like a shit kicker job. Whereas now, like even just conversations I have with compers on my team, it's very much like, holy shit, like, did you see this roto? Or like, did you see this paint that this person did? I could not do that. Like, and only somebody who's trained up to be able to do the job as well as they can and see the images as well as they can do that now, and that's really cool to see. I really respect that.
It's incredible, and I'm really fortunate to have a team of killers. These guys over here that I cannot thank enough for the work they do, for doing shots in house, QCing shots, organizing, coordinating. Like this is absolutely incredible, and a lot of people here decided to actually do that and just have a career. And some of them are really eager to go into comp and to try it out. And I do believe that if you go through the department, you will be an amazing compositor. I've witnessed amazing compositors coming out of this. And I've also seen compositors that never done roto and they're still really good. But we need to think at like when we do bidding, we need to look at the average. We can't look at just the exception and saying, oh, there's one guy that never done roto and he's the best comper in the world. That's not the average. That's the exception. So we need to look at the bulk of people. The bulk of people would gain something from learning the basics of comp. And the basics of comp starts with, what do you do with the plate when it gets to your hands? How can you comp this? Can you comp without the roto? Not really. Pretty much every shot you need a roto to do this, right? To do layering. Do you have to put something in there? Every single shot has to be rotoed. So as a compositor, can you do that or not? Because if no one is doing that for you, you are useless. So learn how to do that, at least as a matter of understanding your craft. If you have to do it, you could do it. It's not just a matter of time. You could actually do it. The paint is the same thing. You have to paint those things. You have to paint the wires, the markers, everything. You want to key. Well, the markers are there. You're going to have to paint the markers, right? So it's part of the craft. And then by the end of the day, if you decide to do that as a career, good for you. Good for you. It's an actual possibility, and it's really good because you can be happy for the rest of your life just doing this. Or if you want to unveil what's next, go into comp and see how hard it is and how fun it is as well.
I would even add to that like, just because people seem to have this like very black and white idea of like, I'm going to use a more traditional example of somebody who's done roto as a springboard into comp, and they think, once I get into comp, I'm never going to have to do that again. And I can tell you that's absolutely not true. There are some people who kind of refuse to do it, but the compositors that I value the most are the ones who, rather than sending a 2-hour roto task to your team, Carlos, they can sit down and be like, you know what, like, I'm going to save time if I do this myself.
Yeah.
And because they've been trained before and how to do it and how to do it efficiently, it could be just a 2-hour task. And maybe they have the time to do it, and that's awesome. We can send a shot to the client faster, get a final faster, and call it done. But yeah, there's what a lot of people don't think about is the logistics of like, hey, I'm a compositor. I want to send some paint work or some roto work to the BG Prep team. You probably will get the work done faster because if you're trained in doing really good roto really fast, you will do it better. But you also have to wait like a day or two for that work to be scheduled, then to be done, and then to be put back in the pipeline, and then you have to plug it in, and it just snowballs. It's lots of these little things that at the end of the day, you could, if you know how to roto yourself, you can save heaps of time.
Tons of time. Yeah, incredible. I've been in a situation like that where there was not even time to do the roto. The roto was not called, and people were like panicking, and I was calming the shot. I was like, "Well, there's no worries. Like, I'll do the roto." I was like, "What? What do you mean? You'll do the roto?" I was like, "Well, you're a compositor, right? You're supposed to be able to do this." It's like, it's going to take me a bit longer because I haven't done it for a while. It's definitely going to take me a bit longer, but I can do it. That's the thing, I'll be able to finish the shot. Don't worry about that. Like, there's no need to send this out because the shot needs a piece of precision roto, and that is simple, right? It comes from how did you train, how did you grow up, and the advantage of coming through this and accepting that you can make a career, or it can be a learning process for you to go, and the best learning process for you to go into your final goal. One of our audience, Scott Anderson, is a good friend of mine that I've trained back in DNAG from Runner. And he says, I think junior DMP artists could benefit from a year of paint prep. I once heard someone in DMP say, if in doubt, chuck a pre-mold on it. So he started as a roto paint artist, and he progressed into DMP. This is a trend that we are seeing right now. Roto paint artists can produce amazing DMP artists, right? And they also benefit from coming from this.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to add, but I was going to tell the same story of like, it is a trend that I'm starting to see more and more, and it is kind of cool to see how much cross compatibility some departments have. And like Roto Paint and DMP is definitely one of those.
Really nice. It's really nice to see, and I think it's really exciting. People keep asking me, why do you do this? It's like, well, I still get excited by seeing people progress through this, and this is where I believe I can influence more people to be really, really good paint artists or compositors. It's in this department. It is why I love to do it so much, and I cherish the training that we do. And I think you share that with me. You like to train people. You like to see people. There's a weird feeling of seeing people succeed, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, it always goes back to that thing of like a good team is always better than the sum of its parts. And that's like
Yeah.
one of the things that gets me going in terms of, yeah, you can, I could talk about it for hours that we don't have.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. We have 1 hour of streaming and we have a lot of work to do. So I think we're gonna end now, and I'm gonna thank you so much for spending this hour with me and all the audience. There's a lot of people watching and commenting. I hope this conversation had helped people to kind of clarify or for some to confuse their ideas, but at least it's a point of view. You know, it's there's going to be always debates around these things. This is what we honestly think. We're not reinventing the wheel. The wheel was done long time ago, right? So there's nothing new here. It's just like it's nice and easy to put things and to discuss things in a nice, friendly environment. So thank you so much, Ben, for taking your time to discuss this.
Of course. And thanks for inviting me for the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, buddy. See you later.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.